Hello, everyone, and welcome to my new show called Out of Nowhere. Well, my special guest today, she's here, is Mindy Troutfest. Mindy is a published author, speaker, television personality, and curator of the Aiden Steve Hughes International UFO Bureau. Can we please welcome Mindy to the show? Hello there.
Hey, Bob. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. We're going to talk about your new book, Dying to Meet Them. One's women, one woman's incredible journey from near-death experience to UAPs. Very interesting subject. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about it.
Well, I decided to go ahead and write a book at the urging of one of the board members from MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, um, detailing kind of how I got involved in investigating UFOs. And this all started back in 2016. It was a big presidential election day here in the US between Hillary and Trump. And so everything was real heated. But I had woke up that day and it was on November 8th. And my face was a little bit swollen that morning. And I thought, okay, well, this is strange. I was only 36 at the time. And my husband and I lived out in the middle of nowhere on a farm in northern Oklahoma. And so I was surrounded by endless wheat fields all around me. So I was miles and miles from any kind of medical assistance or help. And I was by myself because my husband and my kids had left to go to school. My husband was teaching and coaching at the school, and my kids were young. They were about 6 and 8 at the time. And so I was home by myself. Didn't have much problem with the swelling. It wasn't really a bother. It didn't hurt. Um, but I thought, okay, well, let me go take a shower and see if I feel better and see if that kind of helps. And after I got out of the shower, I came and sat down on the couch, and that's when I heard a loud gunshot go off in my head. And at first, I thought that I had been shot. There had been some coyote hunters around our area that were hunting
Yeah.
coyotes. And so I thought, well, they've shot through the wall and they've got me in the head. But I was an ICU nurse at the time. And so I started trying to, assess what was going on. And I didn't feel any blood or anything coming down. And I thought, this has got to be a brain aneurysm. I had a genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it's a connective tissue disorder, and it causes aneurysms. And I knew that most of the people in my father's side of the family had died of aneurysms. So that's when I realized this is pretty catastrophic. After the gunshot went off, I was trying to assess what was happening, and then I felt like this electrical avalanche is the best way I can describe it. And it started at the top of my head and it kind of rolled down my body, and it was extremely painful. And I thought, I'm not going to survive this. And so my thoughts immediately turned to my husband and my kids because I had the front door open. I was expecting them to get home anytime soon, and I'm thinking they're going to find my body. And so, of course, I turned back to my Christian teaching. I start praying, God, please do not let my kids run in here and find me. They'll never recover from that. Um, and then I'm thinking of my husband. My husband's not going to do too well with it either. And so
No.
I'm in deep, deep prayer, God, if I can survive this and not be a burden on my family afterwards, please let me survive this. And I was in such deep prayer and mourning that I didn't even notice my transition. Next thing I know, I like tried to open my eyes and I was just surrounded in darkness. And I thought, well, this is different. I wasn't in any pain and there was nothing to be seen around me. And I thought, okay, well, I think I'm really dead. I've already crossed over.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
my first instinct was to try to clap my hands, which is crazy to think, but that I was trying to see if I had hands.
Yeah.
um, I had put my hand out in front of me to see if I could see it, and when I couldn't, that's whenever I started clapping, and I couldn't. And that's when I realized I really have. I'm crossed over now. Um, and so I start looking out in the darkness and I'm waiting for that tunnel of light to appear. And I'm waiting for my loved ones to come and welcome me into heaven. I'm waiting for Jesus to show up. I'm waiting for something. And the longer I wait, the more nothing is happening. And so I start trying to assess what comes next. What should I be expecting? So I'm thinking, all right, well, I should be facing judgment. Again, with my Christian teaching, my husband had been a Southern Baptist minister, so we were very deeply religious at this point, and we didn't believe in near-death experiences. We thought that they were tricks of demons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was experiencing this and it was not what I was expecting out of the afterlife really, really shook me up. I started praying for my husband and my kids over there because I thought, God, if they found me, please comfort them. And I was trying to grapple with losing them, as much as they would have been losing me here. I had been separated from my children and my husband and everybody else I loved. And here I was in the darkness by myself. And that was so soul crushing because I could feel God everywhere around me, but I was being held separate from him from whatever reason. I could feel the eons of creation.
Was it,
Everything
Mindy,
existed
was
there.
it like being in a void then?
Was it like being in the what?
A void.
The void, yeah. And that's what I came to realize it was later on, after investigating into it a couple of years later. I always called it the dark abyss, because that's kind of what my impression was. That was the only wording I knew for it. I didn't know anything of a void, a dark abyss, before actually encountering it. My expectation of the afterlife was to be welcomed to heaven, and surrounded by
Oh,
loved ones. And when that didn't happen, I started becoming pretty frantic. I started calling out to God, where are you? Is anybody here? And I was very fearful that I was going to be there by myself forever. And that is terrifying, to think that you are alone for eternity without anything. I couldn't turn on a TV. I couldn't even twiddle my thumbs. I couldn't do anything to take my focus off of my thoughts. So that's all that was encompassing me, was just my thoughts. And so I start turning to, what have I done wrong? Why am I not in heaven? And it wasn't a life review, but it was more of a soul searching for me, where I was looking back at what kind of person I had been. And I came to the realization that I never had problems loving other people. It was loving myself enough to think that I was worthy of heaven, um, and worthy of having a happy afterlife. And as soon as I did that, felt a presence behind me over to my left. And it's hard to explain. Everything is in 360. Like, you can see everything around you and feel everything around you, but there's still directions. So in this instance, there was something over what I would say was my left shoulder, that came up. And it was a very male presence, but it did not give me like angelic or human or God. It wasn't anything that I could identify, but it was male. That was the only thing I could identify about it. And it told me, to my mind instantly, you're not going to be here forever. And as soon as he did that, I had instant relief. I thought, okay, I'm not here forever and there's someone else here, so I can work with this. So it was a huge relief knowing that I wasn't going to be by myself. And whenever he did that, we instantly started sailing off to the left in the distance. And I started seeing like a purple glow in the distance. It looked almost like a nebula. And as we got closer and closer, I could see these intersecting lines that were like bright pink. And where they came together at junctions, they were glowing bright yellow. And it just, as we got closer and closer, it was just immense love coming off of this. And he told me that's the fabric of humanity.
Oh.
Yeah. It was just like it had been revealed, you know, something immense had been revealed. It was the only thing there that I saw, and it had such great importance in the scheme of everything that I was experiencing, that it was something he wanted to show me. And as soon as he showed me and revealed that to me, we sailed off further to the left. And when we did, I was back in my body. When I woke up, it was almost like a computer rebooting. And I've had people ask me, you know, where did you enter? You know, some people
Yeah.
say they enter through the top of their head or through their mouth or anything like that. For me, it was almost like I was slammed back in and then it booted up. And I could hear kind of the whoop, you know, as it all started back up. And I started hearing kind of the TV going in the distance, and it was real muffled, and my head was ringing. I was in incredible pain, and I was slumped over on the couch where I had fallen, and I was looking for my cell phone and to call for help. But
Hmm.
when I tried to sit up, I kept falling over because I had had a stroke. And the type of aneurysm I had, it's kind of like a brain aneurysm and a stroke all together. So I kind of had a double whammy there. The stroke ended up saving my life because it clotted off where I would have bled out. But it caused my right arm to go limp and my speech was slurred. So I kept kind of falling down, but I was able to locate my phone and call my father-in-law, who was right across the street. And whenever I did, I just told him 911, which is, you know, emergency here in the
Yeah.
US. And I slurred it so terrible that he immediately, I mean, he was in my living room within a minute that he was standing in front of me. And within minutes, my husband and children arrived and they took me up to the nearest hospital. So, and I was still just trying to figure out what was going on.
You would do.
Do what?
I say you would do. After that, could you remember anything?
I could. I had full memory. I did not lose consciousness, and that's one aspect about this. Um, while my body lost consciousness, my consciousness never blinked out or anything. I have a full stream of memory from my dying moments into the void and then coming back. There's no break in that at all. It was as if I lived it out. It's one of the strongest memories I have in my life because it was so hyper real while I was there. Everything was amplified while I was over there. Um, so whenever went to the hospital didn't take me seriously. my
I,
my function was coming back in my arm, and my speech was starting to clear up. And
yeah.
so they said, well, maybe your neck shifted, or maybe it was a migraine. And I said, no, you don't understand. Something really terrible happened to me. So they did one scan on me and they didn't see anything and they sent me home. And I went home and I was still passing out every day. My head was on fire.
Oh.
It had fried all of the nerves going up into my skull. And so my head, it felt like lava flowing through my skull. It was horrible, horrible pain. Um, and this went on for 2 years. They kept sending me to my neurologist. He would send me home. You got some kind of migraine that looks like a stroke. And so finally, we said, enough of this. I'm not going to get better as long as we live here. So we sold our house on the farm and moved into Oklahoma City. And it was kind of divine intervention, I think. We had gotten a Roku stick to plug into the TV right after we moved into our new house here in the city. And they had these commercials, little 30-second commercial breaks that you had to watch before you could skip forward. And
Yeah.
everyone was for a local hospital, the Integris hospital system here. And they had like heroes of the hospital. And so they were highlighting different, doctors that had solved mystery cases. Well, one of
Right.
them was a young ICU nurse that was a young blonde woman. She was just right up my age. And she was describing how she had stepped into the shower one day and heard a loud pop in her head, and she fell down and was
Oh,
crawling and had lost, function in her arm. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. And I'm telling my husband all excitedly, this is it. Whatever happened to her, that's what happened to me. And so I'm looking up online trying to see the rest of the story from this little 30-second commercial. And that's whenever I first heard vertebral artery dissection. And it said that the main cause of it is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which we already knew I had. So I called that doctor. I mean, I was on the phone with that doctor immediately and said, I need to get in to see you. And I, within a week, was in there with her, and she said, this is so extremely rare. I'm sure your doctors would have caught it if this is what happened, but we'll see. So she sent me in for the scan that I needed, where they put a wire up into my brain and, injected dye and everything. And I remember the radiologist waking me up on the table, and he said, we found it. We found it. He had taken pictures on his cell phone, on his personal phone, because he couldn't believe I was alive sitting there talking with him, because there had been two large ruptures in my artery in my going up into my brain.
right.
And yeah, so I had survived all of this without so much as a Tylenol for 2 years. And so once I got the medical treatment that I needed, I turned and started looking into the mental help that I needed, because I had severe PTSD. Anytime the kids would drop something, I would go into full panic thinking I was having another one. And so I desperately needed some kind of counseling. And
Mm,
so I did. I got set up with a counselor here in Oklahoma City, and she came out every day or every Tuesday for about a year, and we worked through the PTSD portion of it for the physical side. And I finally was to the point where I wanted to tell her about the near death experience. I was finally ready. Like, I felt secure enough that I wasn't going to be visiting the void anytime soon. And I thought, okay, I can talk about this now. But then COVID happened.
oh my God.
Yes, it shut down everything. And because I had texted her that, and I was like, there is something I need to talk to you desperately about next time. I'm finally ready to share. And then, yeah, it was like 2 weeks to kill the curve. Let's just shut everything down for 2 weeks and it'll end everything. I don't know if they did that over in UK, but here in
Yeah,
America,
the did
it was
do.
supposed to be 2 weeks, and that didn't happen. So I waited those couple of weeks, and then I saw that this was going to be dragging on. And my husband was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and I was sitting in the living room, and I finally just turned to him and I said, look, I've got to tell you something. And I don't know how you're going to take this, because my husband was such a deeply, deeply religious man. I mean, him being a pastor for all of
Oh,
these years, um, we didn't even believe in near death experiences. So to tell him I had one, and then to reveal that I didn't go to heaven as a pastor's wife, that Jesus didn't come for me, that was an incredibly difficult
oh,
conversation.
yes, it would have been.
Yeah, I
What did he actually say when you were telling him then?
I'll tell you, my husband is an incredible, incredible person. Uh, he sat with me, he cried with me, and then he started jumping online and said, "Let's reach out. We've got to find others that have been through this." And he didn't doubt me one bit. He saw the terror in my face. He saw the horror that was coming out of my voice as I was trying to tell him. He knew this wasn't anything that I made up, and he knows my character. I'm not someone to tell tall tales. If I say something happened, it happened, and he didn't write me off as, well, I believe this is true for you, that you believe it,
Yeah,
which I was so grateful for. He said, let's figure this out together. And most near death experiencers, they've done studies, over 80% suffer from a divorce following a near death experience because it's so traumatic to the whole family and it challenges every belief you have. And for that religious foundation to be completely shaken, we survived a lot together. Um, and it was difficult. But he went on, he's the one that found IONS, which is the International Association for Near Death Studies. And he said, well, look, they have online meetings. Let's go to them. And he signed us up. So that's what
oh,
we did.
good.
Yeah. So we went to IONS, and they were so wonderful and so welcoming. And there was probably 20 people in that meeting. And you didn't have to be a near death experiencer to be on there. You
Right.
could just have an interest or be family of someone that's had one, or, be uh, facing a death situation of your own and just wondering of what's going to happen afterwards. So there's a whole mixture of people that were there. And I sat quietly and I had to keep on turning off my camera because I was just ugly crying the whole time. There were people on there sharing these wonderful encounters that they had, people that were never religious, that immediately were with Jesus, that had beautiful reunions with their families. And it just, the horror for me to try to process again, why didn't I get that? You know, um, why was I so unworthy? And like I said, I kept turning off the camera and I finally turned it back on at the end and they said, would you like to share anything, Mindy? And so I did. I told them the whole encounter that I had, and they were so supportive. And I mean, signs of love, everyone, grabbing their chests and
Oh,
throwing up the I love yous and putting hearts on the screen. And it was just a wonderful show of support. And I thought, okay, I can get through this. That was really the turning point for me. So after I got set up with IONS and started attending their meetings, and feeling more comfortable with trying to process, why didn't I have a positive near death experience? I believe that what I experienced was exactly what I needed to experience. Um, it changed me in such major ways afterwards that would not have happened if I would have had a positive experience or gone straight to heaven. I
mm,
would have been just completely secure in my salvation. I would have never done soul searching. I would have never reached out to, other people groups and, been so open to so much that I was shut off to before. So it served to grow me in the best possible way. And I think that it was really a divine appointment that I needed to go to the void specifically to learn what I needed to learn in this life with my return. Um, so after that, I got sick again. I ended up having another rupture and ended up back in the hospital.
oh,
I was very ill the second time. My blood pressure was about 40 over 20, and I was really kind of hanging on. And I told my husband, I will not survive another one. If this happens again, I'm not coming back. Um, and so he said, well, let's do some good things while you're here. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to go to Roswell, New Mexico. I want to go to the festival and see the crash site, and I want to do all of that.
Brilliant.
Because I had always been so interested in UFOs since little, 4 or 5 years old. I wasn't watching cartoons. I was watching sightings and unsolved mysteries, and I was hanging on by every word every time I saw a UFO documentary. Um, and so it was always something that captivated me. I was never an experiencer of UFOs up till then, and but it was had always just been a major interest. And so he said, all right, he planned out the trip, and we took the kids and we went to Roswell. And I was still nearly passing out every day and just was not well. But it was such a dream come true, because I don't know if you've ever been to Roswell.
No, I
Um,
haven't. No.
you've got to come out here sometime. But um, out there, the way that they have it set up in the Roswell Museum, they have all the booths there. All of the speakers are set up with their books, and you can just go up and talk to all of these huge researchers in the field. And I had no way of knowing. A lot of them would end up becoming my really good friends. But at the time, it was just so amazing to be able to speak to people of such caliber. And as I was making my way around the room, I ended up speaking with Kathleen Martin, and she's the niece of Betty
Lovely.
and Barney Hill. Yeah,
Yeah, she's
uh,
lovely.
she is. And she really set me on a whole new path that she probably never dreamed that she was putting me on. But I was talking to her about the quantum healing hypnosis technique, because I was wondering if that could help with near death
Yeah.
experiences in the way that it helped a lot of the UFO abductees. And so she had kind of given me some information about it. And she said that they used it some in conjunction with her experiencers from MUFON. And she had just set up the experiencer resource team for them. And I thought, well, MUFON, there's something. I remember MUFON. I should look into them. So on the way home, I thought, okay, let me pull up MUFON. So I'm looking it up on my phone. And I'm telling my husband, we should go to MUFON meetings, babe. This would be something to, give me something to live for. And,
Of
I
course
can
it would.
put my interest into it, put it to work. So I get a hold of MUFON. And again, it's the Mutual UFO Network. And I had known about MUFON, but I never thought that, like, I thought I needed to be part of the military or, law
No.
enforcement. I didn't know that I had anything to offer MUFON, so I never really looked into becoming part of it. But I wanted to at least go to the meetings. I wanted to hear, do they really sit around and talk about, abductions and stuff? And
Yeah.
so I called headquarters, and I ended up talking with Doug Wilson, who was our director of investigations at the time. And I talked to him for like 2.5 hours, and he said, well, if you want to, let's get you set up as being an investigator. You can take the exam, and we'll train you up. And I thought, wow, this is really a
Brilliant.
dream come true. And so I did. I signed up. And then within about a month or two, I had gone through all the training, and I started taking my first cases. And I was blown away. I loved it. I jumped in with both feet. And within about a year, I was promoted to state director here in Oklahoma, and got involved with the Experiencer Resource Team, which is the one that Kathleen set up. And in doing that, I started talking to abductees, and they blew me away. Each one I
Did you
talked to.
find did you find some knowledge about um I don't know, being involved with them more and getting more out of it for you yourself?
That's it. That's exactly it. With each one, they all sounded like me. And I thought, am I crazy? what's going on here? There seems to be some kind of common thread between these abductees and myself as a near death experiencer. And I wanted to test it out. I was like, am I seeing a connection where there is none, or is there really a connection here? I know that with the experiencer team, one of the things we do ask abductees is if they've had a near death experience. And come to find out, Kathleen had done a study, and 55% of abductees have had a near death experience.
Right.
Why? In the
That
general population, there's only about 5% of people, which is still a lot of people, but only about
okay.
5% in the general population have had a near death experience. So you've got a 50% increase here. I think that's the way that works. Math isn't
Yes.
my strong suit, but you've got 50% more that are, in the abductee group. Why? So I started looking online and I thought someone else has got to have seen this and done more study into it. And that's when I found Dr. Kenneth Ring. And he had done a whole battery. He was the professor of psychology at the University of Connecticut back in the 90s. And he had been doing studies into near death experiences. And he's actually one of the gentlemen who helped form IONS way back in the day.
Right.
So he's one of the pioneers in the near death community. And in the 90s, one of his friends gave him a copy of Whitley Strieber's Communion and said, read this. This guy is an alien abductee, and he sounds a lot like your near death experiencers. And at first, Ken Ring said, no, I don't do abductions. I don't do the whole UFO thing. But he said, I'll go ahead and look into it at your urging. And he read through it and he was blown away. He said, yeah, I see what you're saying. There is some connection here. There's got to be.
Alien connection.
Yep. So let's test this out. So he put together what's known as the Omega Project, and he has a book called The Omega Project detailing his whole investigation into this. Yeah, write it down.
Yeah, I've got
um,
it.
he brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man, and he's become a dear friend of mine since then. And I can't thank him enough for his contribution to both fields, because he really was a pioneer in seeing the connections between these two types of phenomena. So what he ended up doing in interviewing both sets, he compared them together, and he ended up finding two major findings. Number one was that there was an encounter prone personality that he was able to identify. And he was able to sort out between people that were fantasy prone. So these weren't people that were out, battling dragons and, going on mystic journeys. And, um, these were people that were able to dissociate to a point of excluding their environment. So there may have been a history of some kind of childhood trauma or something that necessitated them to learn how to do this. But
Yeah.
they were able to actually go within themselves and make contact with other realms. So that's what the encounter prone personality. So you had that at childhood building up. And some people were able to develop the encounter prone personality through teaching. They might have had a parent or something that was big in meditation and was able to teach them ways to go within their own mind and do these things. But a big portion of them were the result of some form of childhood trauma. The other thing that came out was the set of after effects that he identified that was across the board. So anybody that had had an alien encounter or anyone that had had a near-death experience came out being more spiritual rather than religious. They were able to see the big picture. They were more altruistic, more
Mm.
giving, and more open. And they saw a divide almost before their encounter and after their encounter, where they now had a new life purpose. They were able to see the big picture of it all. So he was able to identify these two major findings in these two sets of experiencers that kind of seem to link them together. Um, so I was blown away. Like I said, I reached out to Ken and said, this is amazing stuff because no one else is really looking into this. And now we're starting to see a shift back towards consciousness where people are starting to look back into the connections between these different types of encounters, and seeing that there might be some kind of underlying thread here that we've been missing for the last 30, 40 years, since Ken had put out his book.
Very interesting, especially consciousness. I believe in that. I think it's a big thing. Like some people can connect more than other people.
Right. And, that's one of the things that I encountered there while I was in the void, um, was almost the sense of super consciousness. And when I returned, that didn't diminish. I mean, it diminished to some sense that I was back in a physical body containing that consciousness.
Yeah.
But I maintain that connection to the void. There, especially those first few years, whenever I was really on unsteady footing with my health, I was able to instantly connect with the void. And I had started meditating, which is something that a practice I never did before with being very religious. But in meditations, I could instantly connect back with the void and pull information from there. Whenever I had returned, like I said, it was almost like a computer rebooting. And I got the sense that I had almost entered into a simulation, almost like flicking on a video game and seeing your character, your little avatar there, and
Yeah.
you're controlling your avatar. But it was very strange trying to reintegrate my mind back into this environment because I knew this was no longer our purest form. I knew definitively that our purest form is over there. And so to be reinserted back into this environment that felt very much simulated, I literally felt like I was within a video game, which I had to continue living on my life, and I was so happy to be back with my husband and kids. But there was just this overwhelming sense of disconnect between what I had encountered and what I was now living. So that's something I still work to try to reintegrate my mind into this environment. And it's almost like I have set waypoints, and things that I'm supposed to be doing while here, before I finish the game.
Mindy, has it changed you as a person then?
Absolutely. Thankfully, thank God it changed me. I thought I was doing pretty good, but um, it has opened my eyes so much. I was very set in my religious doctrine before. And, I know some Christians, I've been attacked by some Christians that say, how sad you've lost your faith and everything. Absolutely not. My faith has increased 1,000-fold. I know God exists. I encountered God. As far as Jesus, I believe he plays a huge part in this. I don't know exactly how,
Wow,
but
very
I
good.
also, yeah, also, I'm what's termed an omnis now. I believe that there's truth in all of the religions. There's an underlying truth in all of them that lead us to a route of salvation on the other side. Um, I'm not quick to say, well, they're not Christian, so they're going to hell. I don't believe that any longer. I find value in all religions, in all peoples, it really has opened my eyes to how shut off I was to so many things before. And I'm so thankful that it changed me, because it's affected the relationships in my own life, in my personal life, that
Yeah.
they wouldn't be where they are now if I would have held on to that deep religious dogma that I did before. I can only be thankful. And that's one of the good things. There's with the distressing near death experiences, they tend to shake us. People that have good encounters, they know what they're looking forward to and they almost long for that. On the other side, with people that have had distressing and near death experiences, we don't want to go, over and have bad
No.
experiences. It forces us to change and to open our eyes and to do better. And so again, I think that's where I needed to be in order to set me right, to set my spirit right, and really put me on the path that I needed to be on. And now being able to move into the sphere of investigating UFOs and connecting with those experiencers who have sometimes had their own trauma, that's to be taken out of their environment, much like I was, it's traumatic. And so I can relate with that and, kind of help them work through that, especially people that are just starting to experience it. Um, so it's good to connect on that wavelength right there with them. But I have been able to move into seeing the positives in my distressing encounter, and a lot of the abductees also in time start pulling the positives out of their encounters, even though it's frightening. They see how it changes them as a person and really opens their eyes to the greater picture.
So you started with MUFON now. What do you think about MUFON and how it helps people?
Well, MUFON, I had gone on to become the Oklahoma State Director, and now I've moved up working with HQ at the national level and international level as the Director of Training. And we just rolled out a whole new MUFON University training platform for all of our investigators. And so that's been a huge labor of love that I've been working on the last year and a half or so. And I have such a passion with training up new investigators and even ones that have been in the field for a long time, and how to identify some of these prosaic explanations that we may come across. Within MUFON, there's about 85% we're able to actually identify. And then we narrow it down to that top 15% that are unidentifiable, that we can really zero in and work with these experiencers on a closer level. So part of the training is learning how to look up flight radar and how to track satellites and look up meteor reports and some of the things that we see in the sky that can be misconstrued as an unidentified. I'll tell you, uh, Starlink, Elon Musk has been a bane on us. We actually have
I
a
know that. I've seen the trains. Well, where I live, top
uh,
of Bempton Cliffs is about 400 foot high from the sea level, and I've seen the trains going over, Elon Musk trains going
they're
over.
amazing. They're incredible to
20, I
see.
think there was 21 came over.
Wow. And yes, and while they're still low in orbit, they are so bright. And so we get reports of motherships or of a fleet of UFOs in a
Yes.
line. Yeah. And then he also has the Falcon 9 rocket, which he uses to launch up the satellites. And
Oh, excuse me.
bless you. Whenever the Falcon 9 launches, it has several stages. So whenever it goes up, it separates. And so it makes this beautiful, almost spiral in the sky that people see. And so it looks like very different phenomena than what we would expect. And so
Yeah.
we really have to stay on top of him and the things that he's doing, to make sure that we catch his launches and make sure that when we get a slew of reports about it, that we're able to line it up with if it was or was not him.
What
Um,
about releasing some files and things like that? Do you do that?
Yes, we are. Just a couple of days ago, MUFON rolled out Project Aquarius, and this is so exciting because it has 7 different rooms in it And one of them is like old newspaper clippings that's open and free to the public. And then I think that it's like a $50 fee to get in for a year access, which is just incredible with the amount of information that
That's
is
good.
being released in Aquarius. There's all the MUFON proceedings from the get-go, way back into the 70s. Then the main things are the
I was saying,
files.
Mindy, where can you find them files then?
If you go on MUFON.com and visit the store, then you can go in and buy you don't have to be a member to get access to Aquarius, but you have to buy a library pass for the year, and it'll let you into there. That we have the Leonard Stringfield files, the Ripple files, and then of course I have the Hayden C. Hughes files, which those will
Hayden.
be added sometime in the spring. And Hayden Hughes, he was an investigator here in Oklahoma City. He started his bureau, the International UFO Bureau, back in 1957. And yeah, and so we have all kinds of historic stuff. The original Jimmy Carter presidential report was filed with Hayden Hughes back in 73, where it was the handwritten report from Jimmy Carter. And so that's part of the International UFO Bureau files, which that's been in the public sphere, but we have other things now. I have a deal hanging above me. I don't know. Let me see if you can see up here. There's a picture of Hayden, and
Oh, yeah.
that little deal on the wall, that's actually a letter from Warner von Braun
Oh,
talking about UFOs, writing back and forth to Hayden. There's also a note from the Premier of Russia, former Premier of Russia. Let me think. What was his name? It was, let me pull up my notes here. Nikita Khrushchev. That's who it is.
all
But
right.
he had written back and forth to Hayden about UFOs, and this was back during the Cold War. And so Hayden ended up getting paid a visit by the Men in Black because of
Oh,
this. And whenever they came knocking, FBI came knocking on the door, Hayden was only like 13 or 14 years old. And his mom was like, "Why is the FBI at the door, son?"
yes, exactly.
And they wanted to know why he was writing back and forth to Russia. And it was because he was wanting to know about their UFO program. So he got started at a very young age, and he continued with his writing back and forth to diplomats, embassies. I have letters from embassies all over the world, speaking about their interest in UFOs. Different astronauts wrote to him about the different space programs that were going on. So there's a lot of really good, really historic information that's going to be released to the public for the first time ever. And Hayden's widow, Bonnie, has been incredible. She wanted this information out there because it was sitting in a storage unit for years and years
Oh,
and years since his passing. And we didn't want it to fall by the wayside. And she let me look through it, and I said, "Oh my gosh, Bonnie, we have to get this out." And right as that was happening, that's whenever Bob Spearing from MUFON uh, said, "Hey, well, we're working on Project Aquarius. Would you like to put the files in there?" And we said, "Absolutely." So that'll be part of it. Hayden also worked very closely with the Heaven's Gate cult. That was one of the really interesting investigations he did, because Marshall Applewhite took a liking to Hayden for whatever reason when he was passing through Oklahoma City, and he dropped into the bureau several times and visited with him and Brad Steiger. And so there's tape recordings that have never been heard. I still have not heard them. I'm waiting to get them digitized before listening to them. But once we get them digitized, those will be added. So there's recordings of several of the different cult members before their obvious, tragic suicide in
yeah.
97. And there's a lie detector that he actually gave to Marshall Applewhite, which he passed. And then there's the original recruitment video that Heaven's Gate used. And Hayden wrote quite a bit about insights into the Heaven's Gate cult and kind of what he witnessed and experienced. He had several strange encounters with them during his time speaking with them. So that'll all be part of it, along with there's just countless things.
I
The
bet
Tulsa
there
Boy
is as
Scout
well.
photo.
Do you think people's people's have changed over the years, and the more they will come forward now with their sightings? Like before, they wouldn't talk about it because trying to get ridiculed.
Right. And so much is coming out now. I know that here in America, we had the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that was just passed for this new fiscal year. And they cut about half of the wording for the UAP information. And one of the big things that the congressmen that were in charge of it were really pushing for was the declassification of all UAP related files from the different agencies within our government. And that was one of the first things that got cut. So hopefully next year we can try it again, try to get that information into it and that wording back in there and see if we can get our government to release some of these files. As so far as they don't threaten national security, but there's plenty that our people should be, getting access to. It's time to release the files.
Well, don't you think Congress are talking about it now as well?
Do what?
Congress are talking about it as well now.
Right. And that's what I was saying. The Congress is, some of the representatives were the ones that were really pushing and put a lot of wording about the UAP topic into this last Defense Act, but half of it did not get passed. It was one of the first things to get cut, from what I understand. So again, we'll have to just stay on top of it, stay on top of the briefings, and MUFON's a big part of what's going on out there in Washington, as they, our executive director goes out quarterly and briefs Congress on what we're seeing in our database. We have one of the largest databases in the world with over 140,000 different cases in there, and there's more getting added every day. So we kind of look and see what the trends are. Where are we seeing an increase in UFOs? What types, what shapes are we seeing? And it is a very good conversation to have, because our national security does come into play. MUFON had several reports that came in whenever we had the Chinese spy balloon flying over the central US. And we were able to pull that out and say, look, this is from that Chinese spy balloon. And, being able to brief Congress on that and saying, yeah, we've identified these few reports here. And here's even pictures of it that have come into our database. So that's where the good training comes in on our side with our investigators, to make sure that they're able to rule out what we can and identify what we can, because sometimes it can be a national security problem that we need to be on top of. So it's a very good conversation. It's good that Congress is now getting involved in the UAP topic on levels that we've never seen before. But of course, nobody wants a repeat of what we saw with Blue Book and with the Condon report and saying, oh, well, they're nothing. They're actually looking at a deeper level. And in one of the hearings, I believe it was Grush that brought up that these could be interdimensional, which is very much, MUFON doesn't take a stance on it, because I think, and I think that's a good stance to have, because I think we are seeing things from several different places. There could be interplanetary travel going on, inner Earth, things could be coming up from below the surface. And then we have the interdimensional side of things, which that's the one that I mainly focus on because of my encounter on the other side. I think that some of these entities are coming from around that area of the void. And I really kind of get into that in chapter 9 of my book, whenever I get into the cosmic hologram and all of that.
Cosmic hologram, yeah.
But
yeah,
we know that the U.S. Army was looking into these things back in the 70s. They were trying to train up psychic spies. And there was one sheet that they did declassify, and it was called Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. And what they were doing was they were using deep meditative techniques through the Monroe Institute, and they were using sound frequencies to try to synchronize both hemispheres of the soldiers' brains in order to get them to go into other dimensions. And one of the highest, or the highest dimension that they describe, is the absolute, which is outside of time or construct, very much like the void. And so I know that our government was looking into making contact with entities over in the void, which they called the absolute back in the 70s. And so I don't know if these programs are still going on, and that's part of what they're not wanting to release. I wouldn't be surprised if they were, and they've been perfected by now. But I think that those of us that have had near-death experiences, especially in the void, have a direct contact to that area. And that's what in turn then opens us up to ET contact afterwards. Because a lot of us go on then to have these ET encounters.
Can you still go back into the void then?
I can. In deep meditation, absolutely. It's not as easily accessible as it was those first few years. It's been 7 going on 8 years now for me. I can still connect to it, but boy, those first couple of years I would connect, and a lot of that chapter 9 of my book was pulled directly from the void. I would literally sit and meditate, making sure I had everything right that I was getting from it. And making sure that I understood things on the proper level before writing it. Because that's the stuff that I had come back with, but trying to sort through it, it's such a complex thing. And I'm not some astrophysicist or, I don't even have a bachelor's degree, to try to dig into some of these deeper concepts. There are things that have always fascinated me, but I've told several of my friends, I'm not that smart as what's written in chapter 9. I know I'm not, I'm an intelligent person, but that's more quantum physicist level stuff that I'm not well read on that, and I should. Eventually I'd like to dig in and actually read what the experts have to say, because I'd like to see how it lines up with my experience of what I had over there.
We've nearly come to the end of the show, unfortunately. Where can people get your book?
They can go on Amazon.com. It's called Dying to Meet Them, One Woman's Incredible Journey from NDE to UAP. Or they can find the link on my website, mindytautfest.com. That's MINDYTAUTFEST.com. And I have even a little playlist on there. So those that are musically inclined, it really sets the tone for the book and what I was feeling. And really, there's some of those songs on there that are just so beautiful that really, really spoke to me during my time of healing.
She just put there, thank you, Mindy. That's Alison. It's been very interesting and useful information.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, thank you. It's been lovely. Very interesting. I love it like that. Well, it does, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
I know. I'll put Star in as well. She's said something as well. Great guest.
Aww.
Thank you, Mindy and Bob.
Well, thank you so much.
But yeah, it's an interesting subject, and I'm glad you've for what you're doing now. I think it's helped you as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Every experiencer, there are some beautiful people out there, and I've really enjoyed just the opportunity to get to know so many of these people that are really changing our world. They're incredible, and they're the change makers.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you again. Thank you to everybody in the chat room. I meant to tell you about chat room as well, but usually if anybody's got a question, I'll put it out there and you can see it yourself. I press on it and it comes up there.
Oh, I
So
see it.
thank you
Yeah.
yeah, so thank you very much indeed.
Uh-huh.
My guest on Friday is Trey Hudson. He's been on the show before, but it's quite a couple of years ago now. Very interesting character as well.
Awesome.
Well, thank you again. You take care. Carry on the good work.
Thank you. You too, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye for now. I'll just end it a minute. All right, there we go.